Happy New Year, y'all. I made a video last year, if you're on the Black Romancy newsletter, and I talked about finding your voice and embracing your voice. And I essentially made it an audio focused video on YouTube. And so I thought I'd come back actually here with my face to make a video in the new year talking about learning curves in activism and some of the things that I've learned having a community-driven platform that is centering Black, queer, trans, non-binary people and also welcoming to allies, and some of the things that I've learned about activism beyond the Black community, having been rooted in the work of activism for Black people. And really just as a way to empower folks to not be afraid to further educate yourself on issues outside of the things that you may be currently actively advocating for now and the things that you may be actively doing work for through activism. I think right now, especially, there are a lot of topics and educational opportunities that people have to better educate themselves on systemic oppression and how it affects people even outside of our community, especially as Black people. And I think being based in the United States and having a specific perspective on our own experiences can make us be within that so much that we do have this disconnect of oppression that affects other people too. And if you're in nonprofit work or you do work that is focused on activism consistently, especially on international issues, you may not struggle with that. But I just wanted to make this video to talk about the fact that learning curves do exist in activism. And I myself, at a time where solidarity is happening for multiple countries, but specifically with Palestine being a space where folks are actively talking about Palestine and trying to put that at the forefront, but also like we're talking about free Palestine, we're talking about free Congo, we're talking about free Sudan, and many of the other places that are actively experiencing oppression beyond the oppression that we're facing as Black people in the United States, but also as Black and brown people that exist in other countries as well. And for me, having this platform of Black Remote She being a community-driven platform, again, focused on Black, LGBT and gender expansive folks, intersex folks, non-binary people, and allies, that word allyship has been interesting, to say the least. I think for me, allyship, when I created the Black Remote She platform, stepped beyond just like, oh, white allies, cisgendered people, or people who are of the BIPOC term or acronym that aren't necessarily Black, but also people who are Black, who are not queer, who are not trans, who are not non-binary people, who are allies to the LGBT community as Black people as well. That was my focus on allyship when I created the platform. And when I started Black Remote She as a YouTube channel, I talked about allyship in that way as well. But within having launched the Black Remote She platform in 2020 and making it focused and driven by the community allowed me to further educate myself on things that I was not aware of or super well versed in at the time of me launching the platform. And so more specifically with Palestine, I remember I believe it was in 2020, the first year of Black Remote She, I was unaware of the Zionist movement. I was not clear on any issues related to Israel or apartheid or anything like that. And I remember a Zionist-based organization, because I don't necessarily want to just call their name out like that, but it was difficult for them to receive the fact that there was a community report related to their organization when they had this call out of wanting to support people that were Black and people that were in the LGBT community, and being called out for the fact that they are directly supporting something that harms and has caused violence and genocide towards Palestinian people was a difficult conversation for them to try to have with me. And the ED of that organization was not very happy about the fact that she felt like it was a miseducation piece on behalf of the folks who felt like it was inappropriate to be on the Black Community platform. And for me, as someone who was quite unaware of what most of these things meant at the time, because again, I was focused on this idea of allyship, and I had to educate myself at that time. I immediately removed the role and appreciated the resources that the person who submitted the community report shared with me about what Zionism is and how it does affect Palestinian people and Palestinian rights, and what it looks like for people to try to navigate Zionism because of the harm that is caused, because of the things that they believe in. And so I shared this to say that was a time for me to further expand my knowledge on global issues and rights and oppression that people may or may not have beyond what I knew of within my own form of activism. Having done this work and having worked with nonprofits and progressive organizations focused on gender parity and focused on cultural arts and focused on human rights and focused on, again, this idea of allyship, but what does that really mean? And I think there's been more conversations now about what that means, and people have in some ways scratched the word ally. But for me, I understand allyship as an action, and so I often try to talk about what it means to act as an ally, how to show up for people when you are calling yourself an ally, so that it's not just a word that you're using or an identity that you're trying to take on without having action behind it. And yeah, I just wanted to make this video because in the last video that I made on the channel, I talked about embracing your voice and not being silenced, because a lot of people are being silenced for speaking up on issues that are happening, for speaking up on behalf of people who are being oppressed, for speaking up on behalf of the fact that genocide is actively occurring in multiple countries. And people haven't always been talking about it, and yet have. I think being a millennial and growing up where the news was very commonly watched in my household every morning and every night, but feeling overwhelmed as someone who's highly sensitive and not feeling comfortable to really have the conversations with my family about what it means to see all of the war and violence that was happening on the news, other than the things that, again, directly impacted me through having Black family members as a Black person who are experiencing police brutality, or having peers that have experienced police brutality and racism and sexism and transphobia and homophobia, and witnessing those things. Again, many of the things that pushed me to launch the platform of Black Remote She in the first place, the things that pushed me to use my voice to talk about the issues that I've witnessed and experienced through not only within the workplace, but in general, living my life as a Black, queer, non-binary person. And not feeling like, again, within that idea of allies within the Black community, of people who do not share my same identity or fully understand my identity in some cases, I didn't feel comfortable to really have the conversations and get into everything without feeling like some form of Christian values and white colonialism is going to come up in some way, shape, or form, including talking to people who were a part of the LGBT community but were white, having grown up in the South. So there's so many different layers that I think we all experience, and that can make us feel like, well, I'm being an activist for this thing. I'm being an activist as this identity and for these specific identities. But what does it mean for us to all be liberated as a collective? And how can we stand up and speak up against what's not happening on behalf of people who are oppressed everywhere? And when we think about having learning curves in activism, it's important to continue to educate ourselves, not just for the things that we may do in our day-to-day work or in protesting, the general protests that you may be used to going to, or the things that you may be used to protesting aloud, if you're not able to physically be in protest, or maybe you're virtually protesting in some way, it's so important to continue to self-teach, to continue to learn, to continue to be willing to learn, to make mistakes if that's what's necessary, to then learn how to not make that mistake again. And for me, in that moment of having had to have learned about Zionism when I first launched Black Remote Shia in 2020, and now being at a place where I can say Free Palestine and better understand why it is that I'm saying that, and to also understand who is not, purely through the things that they choose to support instead. And so there are so many resource guides that I've seen, and there's really no excuse. And we have this conversation all the time as Black people talking to white people about, we're not here to educate you. And I think there's something to be said as well for us as Black people. If we are unsure or uncertain about how to show up for other systemically oppressed people, how can we then educate ourselves so that they are not educating us? How do we also hold space for our own struggles along with them for the liberation of all of us together? How do we liberate ourselves and other people? These are the types of questions that I think lead us to a place where we no longer feel like we're missing from the conversation of liberation, but that we're also not trying to make it seem as though we're the only ones who need to be liberated, because ultimately the system has impacted a lot of people, and there are multiple different systems that have impacted people, and being able to better understand those things, being willing to take the time to educate ourselves, and not saying, well, that doesn't apply to me, or that's not something I want to worry about. We all have so many things that we have to focus on, just trying to live and exist, especially within this community that I serve and choose to center. But we can't truly search or focus on activating liberation for ourselves if we are not being intentional about putting that energy and giving that love and care to everyone around us. And I hope that this video is something that helps you have a different perspective. If you have been feeling like, I don't feel like I'm educated enough, or I don't feel like I really know what to do, I hope that you take advantage of the resources that people are sharing, and also be discerning in looking at resources as well. I think especially with so much social media activism, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I personally am not big on social media. And so for folks who aren't big on social media, finding other ways to be able to support and speak out and make space for speaking and calling on behalf of ceasefire, and being able to know who you need to contact to be able to advocate on behalf of stopping the genocide that's happening in and outside of the US, because there are still trans people being killed here. There are still Black people being killed here. There are still Black and brown people fighting to go out of their homes and feel safe, or be within their homes and feel safe. And so a lot of what I try to do through my work is to offer those resources to people. And so I have collected some of the resources that I've seen that then connect people to even more resources, whether that's resource guides, protest lists, action guides, things that you can actively do, including how to stay safe during protesting, online and in person, and teach-ins, abolitionist trainings, all the things. So if you're interested in looking through any of those resources, if you've been trying to better educate yourself, or you're simply continuing to speak up because you've already been doing this and you feel like you don't have that learning curve, but you want more resources, or you want resources to be able to share, definitely look in the description box for the Black Remote Shia link tree, which has a list of solidarity resources to help support and free oppressed people. And Again, these resources are focused on Palestine, but many of the resources can be used in support and to speak out for other countries as well. And per usual, there are also resources available for the community that we serve at Black Women She. Again, I say we as the founder and sole person who runs Black Women She, but it is community driven. And so I'm so grateful to folks who have continued to be in community with Black Women She and the work that I've been doing over the past few years. But I'm so grateful to be in community with y'all. I'm grateful to be able to have these conversations and share my own personal experience. Again, that's how Black Women She started, so that I can further empower you to feel comfortable to stand as you are, and to be able to also know that it's okay that you may not know things, or you may not know exactly what to say or when to say it, but what's most important is that you say something. So if this has been helpful for you in any way, I would love for you to comment down below or hit a like, and stay tuned for more videos. I'm trying to be more active with YouTube again. After launching the platform, Black Women She has turned into so many different things, and I have so many things that I've wanted to do to be able to get resources out to the community, including funding, gender affirming networks, support groups, all the things. So definitely check out blackwomanshe.com if you aren't familiar, or you are, but you're looking for resources to support you in your livelihood. And if you aren't already on the newsletter, I also have a link in the description box below, but likely if you're seeing this video, you may have already gotten it through the newsletter. So thank you for being here. Thank you for continuing to support, and I'll see y'all soon.